I was drinking my morning coffee when I saw the orange envelope taped to my front door, and I already knew my day was about to go straight to hell. The envelope had the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association logo stamped on it, that pretentious little tree design that made me want to punch something every time I saw it. I ripped it open right there on my porch in Sterling Heights, Michigan, letting the cold February air bite at my fingers while I read the most ridiculous thing I had seen in my 32 years of life. Notice of violation. Obstruction of community signage. Fine. $250. I read it 3 times. Then I walked down my driveway in my slippers and pajama pants, coffee still in hand, to see what the hell they were talking about. The snow from last week's storm was still piled up where the plow had pushed it, a perfectly normal mound of white that sat at the corner of my property. And yes, technically it was blocking part of the wooden Meadowbrook Hills, a community of excellence sign that sat right at the edge of my lot. The sign that I never asked for. The sign that the HOA had planted there 6 months ago, without consulting any of the homeowners on my street. The sign that I had complained about in writing because it was ugly and blocked my view when pulling out of my driveway. I stood there in the cold steam rising from my coffee mug, and something inside me just snapped. My name is Nathan Voss, and I am a software engineer who works from home. I moved to this neighborhood 2 years ago because the house was beautiful, the price was right, and I was stupid enough to think that an HOA wouldn't be that bad. I had heard the horror stories, sure, but I figured those were exaggerations. People complaining about nothing. I was wrong. The HOA president was a woman named Barbara Hutchins, and she was exactly what you would picture when someone says the word Karen. 53 years old with that specific haircut that defied the laws of physics, always wearing velour tracksuits in various shades of pastel, and possessing the uncanny ability to make every conversation feel like a personal attack. She had been HOA president for 7 years, running unopposed because nobody else wanted to deal with the headache. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the snow pile, then another picture of the fine notice. Then I went inside, got dressed, and did something I had been meaning to do for weeks. I called my buddy Derek, who owned a landscaping company. "Hey man, weird question. How much would it cost to get a few truckloads of snow delivered?" Derek laughed. "Delivered? Nathan, there is literally snow everywhere right now. Why would you need snow delivered? I will pay double your usual rate. Can you do it or not?" There was a pause. "You know what? I do not even want to know." "Yeah, I can do it. We have been clearing parking lots all week. I have got piles of the stuff. When do you want it? Today. And every day for the foreseeable future. You are losing your mind, buddy. Probably. I will send you my address." By noon, Derek showed up with the first truck. He dumped it right on top of the existing pile, and I stood there directing him to make sure it completely covered the HOA sign. The pile was now about 6 feet tall and spreading nicely across the corner of my property. "This is the weirdest job I have ever done in February," Derek said, climbing out of the truck. "You going to tell me what this is about?" I showed him the fine notice. He read it and started laughing so hard he had to lean against his truck. Oh man, you are declaring war." "You know that, right?" "I am aware. I love it. Same time tomorrow, same time tomorrow." He drove off, and I went back inside to start my workday. I had 3 video meetings and a code review to finish. But I kept glancing out my window at that beautiful pile of snow, and I felt something I had not felt in months. Satisfaction. It took Barbara exactly 4 hours to notice. She came marching down the street at 4:30 in the afternoon, her purple tracksuit bright against the gray winter sky. I watched her from my living room window as she stopped at the corner of my property and stared at the snow pile. She walked around it. She took pictures with her phone. Then she marched right up to my front door and rang the bell like she was trying to break it. I took my time answering. When I opened the door, she was already red-faced. "Mr. Voss, what exactly do you think you are doing, shoveling my driveway? The snow has to go somewhere, Barbara." "That is not from your driveway. That pile has doubled in size since this morning." "Has it? I had not noticed." Her eye twitched, actually twitched. "You received a fine this morning for obstructing community signage. The appropriate response is to remove the obstruction, not to make it worse." "Well, Barbara, I disagree with the fine. I am in the process of filing an appeal." "There is no appeal process." "Then I guess the snow stays where it is. Is there anything else I can help you with?" She sputtered for a moment, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "This is unacceptable. This is a violation of community standards. This is. Snow, Barbara, it is frozen water. It will melt in spring. You will be fined again, every single day until you comply." I smiled at her, looking forward to it. I closed the door in her face and went back to my computer. Through the window, I watched her stomp back down the street, phone already pressed to her ear. Probably calling an emergency HOA board meeting. Good. That evening, I did my research. I pulled up the HOA bylaws, the county ordinances, and every property law I could find online. The thing about HOA rules is that they have to exist within the framework of actual law. And actual law said that I could pile snow on my property pretty much however I wanted, as long as it was not creating a safety hazard or blocking public right-of-way. The sign was on my property line, but the HOA had never gotten an easement for it. They had just planted it and assumed nobody would complain. I printed everything out, highlighted the relevant sections, and put it all in a folder. Then I ordered a pizza and watched a movie. It was the most relaxed I had felt since moving to this neighborhood. The next morning, there were 2 orange envelopes on my door. Notice of violation. Obstruction of community signage. Fine. $250. Notice of violation. Failure to maintain aesthetic standards. Fine. $250. $500 for the same pile of snow. I laughed out loud. Derek showed up at noon with another load. This time, I had him dump it so the pile was now 7 feet tall and spreading even further along the property line. "You got another fine?" Derek asked. 2, actually. "And you are still going?" "I am just getting started." "Nathan, I have known you for 5 years and I have never seen you like this. It is kind of scary. They want to play games with made-up rules and fine me for snow. I will give them more snow than they know what to do with." He shook his head, grinning. "All right, man. Your money, your war. Same time tomorrow." Same time tomorrow. By day 3, the pile was 9 feet tall. By day 4, it was 11 feet. I was spending about $200 a day on snow delivery, which meant I was actually losing money compared to just paying the fines. But I did not care anymore. This had stopped being about money. The neighborhood was starting to notice. My next-door neighbor, an older guy named Frank, came over on day 5. "Nathan, I do not mean to pry, but what exactly are you doing?" I explained the situation. He listened quietly, then looked at the snow pile, which was now taller than my garage. "That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard," he said. My heart sank. "Yeah, I know it is childish, but—" "No, I mean the HOA. That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. You got fined for snow in Michigan. In February." He started laughing. "Keep building, son. This is the best entertainment I have had in years." Word spread fast. By day 6, people were walking by just to see the pile. Some of them took pictures. A few gave me thumbs up. One couple brought me homemade cookies. Barbara, meanwhile, was losing her mind. The fines kept coming. Every single day, like clockwork. I had a stack of orange envelopes on my kitchen counter that was getting thicker by the hour. The fines had escalated from $250 to $500 to $750. By day 8, she was fining me $1,000 a day. I kept building. On day 9, I got a certified letter. This one was not in an orange envelope. It was official looking from a law firm in Detroit. I opened it with my morning coffee, which had become my routine. Cease and desist. You are hereby ordered to remove the snow obstruction from your property within 48 hours or face legal action. I took a picture of it and texted it to my own lawyer, a guy named Marcus Chen, who I had used when I bought the house. He called me back in 10 minutes. Nathan, what did you do? Long story. Can they actually sue me for having snow on my property? Let me read this more carefully. I heard papers rustling. Okay, so they are claiming you are violating multiple HOA covenants, creating a public nuisance, and willfully defying community standards. The problem for them is that snow is not a permanent structure. You are not violating any county ordinances, and the sign they are claiming you are obstructing was never properly approved for placement on your property line. So they cannot sue me. Oh, they can sue you. Anyone can sue anyone. The question is whether they would win. And based on what I am seeing here, no, they would not. But Nathan, this is going to cost you money to defend. How much, if it goes to court? Could be $5,000, $10,000, maybe more. I thought about it. I had savings. I worked a good job. And more importantly, I was tired of being pushed around by people who thought they could make up rules and expect everyone to follow them without question. Do what you need to do, Marcus. I am not backing down. You are sure about this? Over a snow pile. It stopped being about snow around day 3. Now it is the principle, he sighed. All right, I will draft a response, but Nathan, be careful. HOA boards can be vindictive. Yeah, I am getting that impression. I hung up and called Derek. How tall can we go before the pile becomes structurally unsound? What? The snow pile. How tall can we make it? It depends on the base width and the consistency of the snow. Why? Because I want it taller. Nathan, it is already like 14 feet tall. You are building a snow mountain in suburban Michigan. Your point, he laughed. No point. I will bring extra snow today. Let's see how high we can go. By day 12, the pile was 17 feet tall. It was visible from 3 streets over. People were coming from other neighborhoods to take pictures. Someone posted it on social media, and it started getting shared. The Great HOA Snow War, one post called it. Another said, "This guy is my hero." Local news picked it up on day 14. I was working at my desk when my doorbell rang. A woman in a business suit stood there with a camera crew behind her. Nathan Voss. I am Jennifer Park from Channel 7 News. We heard about your situation with the HOA. Would you be willing to talk to us? I looked at the camera, then at her, then at the massive pile of snow behind them. Sure. Why not? They set up in my front yard. Jennifer asked me to explain what happened, and I told her the whole story. I showed her the original fine, the follow-up fines, the cease and desist letter. I explained how the sign had been placed without proper approval, how I had tried to resolve things through normal channels, and how the HOA had responded with increasingly aggressive penalties. So your response was to build the snow pile higher, she asked. My response was to not let them bully me over something as ridiculous as snow in Michigan in February. I am not violating any laws. I am not hurting anyone. I am literally just existing in my own home, and they are trying to fine me thousands of dollars for it. The HOA claims you are being deliberately antagonistic. The HOA is correct. I am absolutely being deliberately antagonistic at this point, because they started this fight and I am going to finish it. The segment aired that evening. I watched it with a beer, sitting on my couch while my phone blew up with texts from friends and family. My mom called from Florida. "Nathan, I just saw you on the news. Are you okay?" "I am fine, Mom. This seems very unlike you. You are usually so reasonable." "I am being perfectly reasonable." They are the ones being insane. "But honey, is it really worth all this stress over a sign?" Yes, it is," she sighed. "Your father would have done the same thing. He never could stand bullies either." We talked for a while longer, and after we hung up, I felt better. My dad had passed away 3 years ago, and I still missed him every day. He had been a stubborn man, the kind who would dig in his heels over a principle and never budge. I guess I got that from him. The news segment changed things. Suddenly, people were paying attention. The local subreddit exploded with debate. Some people thought I was a hero standing up to HOA tyranny. Others thought I was a childish troublemaker, but everyone had an opinion. Barbara was not happy about the attention. She called an emergency HOA meeting on day 16, and I received a formal invitation to attend. It was not optional. The meeting was held in the community center, a bland building that always smelled like old carpet and disappointment. When I walked in, the room was packed. Apparently, everyone wanted to see this showdown. Barbara sat at the front table with the other board members. There was Richard, a retired accountant who looked perpetually confused about where he was. There was Susan, a woman in her 60s who nodded along with everything Barbara said. And there was Tom, a middle-aged guy who actually seemed reasonable but never spoke up. "This meeting is now in session," Barbara announced, banging a gavel that seemed unnecessarily dramatic. "We are here to address the ongoing violation by Nathan Voss at 847 Maple Drive." I sat in the front row, arms crossed. "Mr. Voss, you have accumulated over $12,000 in fines for various violations related to the snow obstruction on your property. You have ignored all warnings, all cease and desist orders, and all attempts at reasonable communication." Reasonable communication. I stood up. "Barbara, you taped a fine to my door without any prior warning. You have escalated fines to absurd amounts. You sent me a legal threat from a lawyer. At no point did you try to have an actual conversation with me. You were in violation of clearly stated community standards. Show me where in the HOA bylaws it says I cannot have snow on my property." She flipped through a binder. "Section 7, subsection C, all properties must maintain aesthetic standards consistent with community values." That is deliberately vague. What does that even mean? It means you cannot build a 17-foot pile of snow that blocks community signage. The sign that was placed on my property without permission, the sign that I formally complained about, that sign, the room murmured. People were listening now. Barbara's face flushed. "The sign was approved by the board, but not by me, and it is on my property line. You need an easement for that. You have an easement, Barbara." Silence. "That is what I thought." I pulled out my folder of research. According to County Ordinance 247B, any permanent structure placed within 5 feet of a property line requires written consent from the property owner. "Did you get my consent?" "It is just a sign," Susan interjected. "You are making a mountain out of a molehill." "Actually, I am making a mountain out of snow, but that is beside the point. The point is that you are trying to fine me for something that is not actually against any rules, while simultaneously ignoring the fact that you broke actual county ordinances." Barbara stood up. "This is absurd. We are the HOA. We have the authority to maintain community standards. You have the authority granted to you by the bylaws, which have to operate within actual law, And according to actual law, you messed up. Marcus had helped me prepare for this. He could not be here in person, but he had coached me on what to say and how to say it. I had evidence. I had facts. And I had a room full of neighbors who were tired of Barbara's authoritarian nonsense. I motion that we escalate this to legal action, Barbara said, looking at the other board members. Richard looked confused. Susan nodded enthusiastically. Tom finally spoke up. I think we should table this and consult with our attorney first. This seems more complicated than we initially thought. We do not need to consult with anyone, Barbara snapped. This is a clear violation. Barbara, he has a point about the easement, Tom said quietly. If we did not get proper approval for the sign placement, we might be the ones in violation. The room erupted in chatter. People started arguing. Someone in the back yelled, "Let the man have his snow pile," and several people applauded. Barbara banged her gavel repeatedly. Order, order. This meeting is adjourned, she stormed out, and I left feeling better than I had in weeks. Tom caught up with me in the parking lot. Nathan, hold on. I turned. Yeah. Look, I want to apologize. I should have spoken up sooner. Barbara has been running this board like a dictatorship for years, and most of us just go along with it because it is easier than fighting. But you are right. The sign thing was not handled properly. So, what happens now? I am going to call an emergency vote to have the sign removed and to void all your fines. I cannot promise it will pass, but I will try. I appreciate that. But Nathan, maybe stop adding to the pile. You have made your point. The whole neighborhood is talking about it. You won. I thought about it. The pile was now 18 feet tall and had been featured on the news. People were taking selfies in front of it. I had started something that was bigger than just me versus the HOA. I will think about it, I said. Tom nodded and walked away. I drove home, and when I got there, I saw Barbara's car parked on the street in front of my house. She was standing next to the snow pile, talking to someone on her phone. When she saw me, she ended the call and marched over. "You think you are so smart, do you not?" she said. "You think you can just defy the rules and make a mockery of this community? Barbara, go home. I am tired. I have been president of this HOA for 7 years. 7 years of keeping this neighborhood beautiful and maintaining our property values. And you come in here with your childish antics and your news interviews, and you undermine everything I have built. You have not built anything, Barbara. You have just pushed people around and made their lives harder. That is not leadership. That is being a bully. I am protecting this community." "From what, Snow, do you hear yourself?" She stepped closer and her voice dropped. "You have no idea what you have started. I will make your life hell. I will find every single violation, every tiny infraction. I will fine you until you cannot afford to live here anymore." "Are you threatening me, Barbara?" "I am promising you." I pulled out my phone and realized I had been recording since she started talking. "Good to know. I will make sure to share this with my lawyer." Her face went white. "You were recording me. This is a one-party consent state, Barbara. I do not need your permission." I walked toward my house. "Now get off my property." She left, but I could see the rage in her eyes. This was not over. The next morning, I woke up to find that someone had spray-painted "asshole" on my snow pile. It was in big red letters, visible from the street. I took pictures for documentation, then called the police non-emergency line to file a report. The officer who came out was a young guy named Martinez. He took pictures, wrote up a report, and shook his head. "I saw you on the news," he said. "The HOA did this." "I cannot prove it, but yeah, probably." "That is vandalism. You want to press charges if we find who did it." "Absolutely." "All right, we will add this to the file, and hey, for what it is worth. My parents live in an HOA neighborhood. I get it. Those people can be crazy. After he left, I called Derek. "Can you bring an extra load today? I need to cover up some graffiti." "Someone tagged your snow pile." "Yep. That is actually kind of hilarious, but also messed up." "Yeah, I will bring extra." By that afternoon, the graffiti was buried under fresh snow, and the pile was back to its full glory. I also installed security cameras, 3 of them, covering different angles of my property. If Barbara or anyone else wanted to try something, I would have it on video. Day 20 brought a new development. I received a notice that the HOA was placing a lien on my property for unpaid fines, which now totaled over $15,000. I called Marcus immediately. "They cannot do that," he said after I read him the notice. "Well, they can, but it would not hold up. You are disputing the fines and we have not gone through any legal process yet. This is intimidation." "So what do I do?" "File a formal dispute with the county. I will draft it today. And Nathan, I think it is time we go on offense. We could sue them for harassment, improper sign placement, and potentially for the vandalism if we can prove it was them." "How do we prove it?" "Let me work on that. In the meantime, keep documenting everything." That night, I reviewed the security camera footage from when the graffiti appeared. It was hard to see clearly because it was dark and the angle was not perfect, but there was definitely a person in a light-colored jacket. They were about the right height and build to be Barbara, but I could not be certain. I posted the footage online, blurring out the face but asking if anyone recognized the jacket or the gait. Within hours, 3 different neighbors confirmed that it looked like Barbara. One of them even had a picture of her wearing that same jacket at a community event. I sent everything to Marcus and to Officer Martinez. The police said they would follow up. Days 21 through 25 were relatively quiet. Derek kept bringing snow. The pile kept growing. It was now over 20 feet tall and had become a legitimate landmark. Someone made a Facebook page called the Snow Pile of Resistance, and it got 5,000 followers in 3 days. A journalist from the Detroit Free Press came out to interview me. Then someone from a national news blog. The story was spreading beyond just local news. "Why do you think this has resonated with so many people?" the blogger asked me. "Because everyone has dealt with some petty authority figure who made their life harder for no good reason. HOAs are just the most obvious example. People are tired of being told what they can and cannot do on property they own. What is your end goal here? Honestly, I just want them to admit they were wrong and leave me alone. I do not even care about the fines at this point. I care about the principle. And if they do not back down, then I guess I will keep building until spring." On day 27, Tom called me. "Nathan, we are having another board meeting. I managed to get the votes to put the sign issue up for discussion. Can you come?" "When?" "Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. I will be there." This meeting was smaller. Just the board members and a few interested neighbors. Tom led the discussion. "I have done research into the sign placement at 847 Maple Drive. Based on county ordinances, we should have gotten written approval from Mr. Voss before installing it. We did not. That puts the HOA in a position of liability." "This is ridiculous," Barbara said. "We are bending over backwards for one troublemaker." "We are following the law, Barbara. There is a difference." Tom looked at me. "Nathan, if we remove the sign and void the fines, will you remove the snow pile?" "I will let it melt naturally come spring. I am not paying to have it removed after all this." "That is fair. I motion that we remove the sign, void all fines related to this incident, and issue a formal apology to Mr. Voss." "Second," Richard said quietly. Barbara looked betrayed. "Richard, you are siding with him." "I am siding with common sense, Barbara. This has gone too far." The vote was 3-1 with only Barbara voting against. The motion passed. I should have felt victorious, and I did partially. But Barbara's expression made it clear this was not over for her. "Fine," she said coldly. "The sign will be removed by the end of the week. Your fines are voided, but Mr. Voss, I will be watching your property very carefully from now on. Every blade of grass that is too long, every paint chip, every minor violation, I will find them." "Looking forward to it," I said. The sign was removed 3 days later. A crew came out, pulled it from the ground, and hauled it away. Neighbors cheered, literally cheered. Someone brought champagne. The snow pile remained, a 22-foot monument to stubbornness. I stopped adding to it after the sign was removed, but I was not going to tear it down. It would melt when it melted. March came and the weather started warming up. The pile began to shrink, slowly but surely. People still came by to take pictures, though less frequently now. The news cycle had moved on. Life was returning to normal, but Barbara was true to her word. She found violations everywhere. My mailbox was slightly faded and needed repainting. My lawn had some bare patches from winter. My garbage cans were visible from the street for 10 minutes longer than the bylaws allowed. Each violation came with a fine. $50 here, $100 there. She was death by 1,000 cuts. I documented everything and sent it to Marcus. "This is harassment," he said. "Clear-cut harassment. We have a pattern now. I think it is time we file suit. Do it." The lawsuit was filed in mid-March. We were suing the HOA for harassment, abuse of power, and emotional distress. We were asking for all fines to be voided, for Barbara to be removed from her position, and for damages. The local news picked it up again. "Snow Pile Man Sues HOA," the headlines read. My Facebook page gained another 10,000 followers. I was being stopped at the grocery store by people wanting to shake my hand. It was surreal. The HOA's lawyer reached out to Marcus in early April. They wanted to settle. They are offering to void all current and future fines, remove Barbara from the board, and pay $20,000 in damages, Marcus told me over the phone. "What is the catch? You have to sign an NDA. You cannot talk about any of this publicly anymore." "No." "Nathan, $20,000 is a good settlement." "I do not care. This whole thing has been public from the start. I am not going to let them silence me now just so they can save face." "All right, I will tell them no, but this means we go to court. You ready for that?" "Yeah, I am ready." The court date was set for June. In the meantime, the snow pile finally melted completely in late April. It left behind a muddy patch that I seeded with grass. By May, you could not even tell it had been there, but everyone remembered. The trial was held in county court in front of Judge Patricia Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had clearly heard every kind of property dispute imaginable. Both sides presented their cases over 2 days. Marcus laid out the timeline. The original fine, the escalating penalties, the cease and desist, the lien threat, the vandalism, and the pattern of harassment that followed. We had documentation for everything. Pictures, videos, recordings, witness statements from neighbors. The HOA's lawyer argued that I had been deliberately antagonistic, that I had created a public spectacle, and that I had violated community standards. Judge Morrison listened to everything, reviewed the evidence, and asked pointed questions to both sides. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said at one point, looking at the HOA's lawyer. "Your client fined Mr. Voss for snow blocking a sign that was placed on his property without proper authorization. The sign was approved by the HOA board, Your Honor, but not by the property owner and not through the proper county channels for structures near property lines." "Correct. The sign is not a permanent structure, Your Honor. It was planted in the ground with concrete. That seems fairly permanent to me." She turned to Marcus. And your client responded by making the snow pile larger. Yes, Your Honor, as a form of peaceful protest against what he viewed as unjust fines. Peaceful protest, she repeated, and I could not tell if she was amused or annoyed. With snow. Yes, Your Honor. She shook her head slightly. I will issue my ruling tomorrow morning. That night, I could not sleep. I kept replaying the trial in my head, trying to figure out which way it would go. Marcus seemed confident, but court was always unpredictable. The next morning, we were back in the courtroom. Judge Morrison came in, and everyone stood. I have reviewed all evidence and testimony, she began. This case represents a troubling pattern of HOA overreach and abuse of authority. While Mr. Voss's response was admittedly unusual, it does not change the fact that the initial fine was improper, the sign placement violated county ordinance, and the subsequent actions by the HOA constituted clear harassment. I felt my heart race. I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff. All fines are voided. The HOA is ordered to pay damages in the amount of $35,000. Additionally, I am ordering a full audit of HOA practices and recommending that the current board be dissolved and new elections held within 60 days. Barbara gasped audibly behind me. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am referring the vandalism incident to the county prosecutor's office for potential criminal charges. If the evidence supports charges, they will be filed accordingly. The gavel came down. It was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. I gave a brief statement about being glad that justice had been served and hoping this would lead to reform in how HOAs operated. Marcus stood next to me, grinning. You did good, kid, he said after the reporters left. We did good. Thank you for sticking with me through this insanity. Are you kidding? This was the most fun I have had in years. Most of my cases are boring contract disputes. We shook hands and I drove home. The neighborhood looked different somehow, lighter. People waved as I drove by. A few neighbors had put up signs that said, "We stood with Nathan," which was cheesy but touching. When I pulled into my driveway, Frank was waiting on my porch with a beer. Figured you could use one, he said, handing it to me. We sat on my porch steps, drinking beer in the afternoon sun, and he told me stories about the neighborhood before Barbara took over the HOA. It sounded nicer back then. More community, less enforcement. Maybe it will be that way again, I said. Maybe. You certainly gave everyone the kick in the ass they needed to pay attention. The following week, the HOA held new elections. Tom ran for president and won easily. Barbara did not even show up to the meeting. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was talking about selling her house and moving. Officer Martinez called me a few days after the trial. Wanted to give you an update. We have enough evidence to charge Barbara Hutchins with vandalism and trespassing. The prosecutor is filing charges. What kind of penalties are we talking about? For a first offense, probably a fine, community service, maybe probation. Nothing too severe, but it will be on her record. Good enough for me. I just wanted her to face some consequence for her actions. Understood. You should receive notification when the court date is set. Barbara's court date was set for August. I did not attend, but I read about it later. She pleaded guilty to misdemeanor vandalism and was sentenced to 100 hours of community service and a $500 fine. Ironic, considering how many fines she had issued to me. The new HOA board under Tom's leadership was completely different. They reached out to all the homeowners, held open meetings, and actually listened to concerns. The bylaws were revised to be clearer and less arbitrary. It felt like a real community again. As for me, I used some of the settlement money to take a long vacation. I went to Colorado and did some actual snow skiing, which felt appropriate. When I came back in September, life had finally returned to normal. I still live in Meadowbrook Hills. My grass is green, my house is maintained, and I follow all reasonable HOA rules. But I keep pictures of the snow pile on my wall as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes you have to stand up to people who abuse their power, even if the fight seems ridiculous from the outside. A reminder that communities work better when people push back against petty tyranny. And a reminder that sometimes the best response to an unjust fine is simply to build the pile higher. Frank comes over every few weeks, and we sit on my porch and drink beer. Sometimes other neighbors join us. We talk about normal things like sports and work and the weather. Nobody talks about HOA drama anymore because there is not any. The spot where the snow pile used to be has the greenest grass on my whole lawn now. Something about all that melting snow enriched the soil. It is funny how something that started as an act of defiance ended up making that corner of my property the most beautiful part. Last week, a new family moved in down the street. Young couple with a kid. They came by to introduce themselves, and after some small talk, the husband asked me if the neighborhood was pretty quiet. Mostly, I said. We had some drama a while back with the old HOA board, but things are much better now. Oh yeah, I think I heard about that. Something about snow. I smiled. Yeah, something like that. They seemed nice. Normal people who just wanted a good place to live and raise their kid. The kind of people who make a neighborhood actually feel like a community. After they left, I stood in my driveway and looked at the corner of my property. It was just grass and trees now. No sign, no pile, no evidence of the battle that had consumed 3 months of my life. But everyone who lived here remembered. And more importantly, they remembered what it had taught them. That power needs to be checked. That rules need to make sense. That you should not just go along with something because it is easier than fighting. I went inside and made dinner. Just another quiet evening in Meadowbrook Hills, Michigan. The snow would come again in a few months, like it always did. And when it did, I would shovel my driveway and pile the snow wherever the hell I wanted on my own property. Because sometimes, standing your ground is the most important thing you can do, even if you are just standing on a pile of snow. The settlement money sat in my savings account, mostly untouched except for the vacation. I thought about what to do with it. Marcus suggested investing it, being responsible, but after what I had been through, I wanted to do something meaningful. I donated $10,000 to a legal aid fund that helped homeowners fight unjust HOA actions. People who could not afford lawyers like Marcus, who were being bullied by their boards and had no recourse. The fund provided free legal consultation and helped with court costs for those who needed it. When the organization called to thank me, the director told me that my donation would help about 20 families. 20 families who would not have to face HOA tyranny alone. That felt right. That felt like the snow pile had meant something beyond just my own stubborn pride. Tom stopped by one evening in October. The leaves were changing, and the air had that crisp autumn smell that meant winter was coming again. "Wanted to show you something," he said, pulling out his phone. He showed me the new HOA bylaws. They were half as long as the old ones, written in plain language and actually reasonable. We put in a formal appeals process, and we added a clause that any fines over $100 have to be approved by a majority of the board, not just the president. That is great, Tom, really. It would not have happened without you, you know. Everyone was too scared or too apathetic to challenge Barbara. You showed us that it was possible. I just did not want to pay a fine for snow, he laughed. Yeah, well, your stubbornness changed things for the better. So thank you. After he left, I thought about that. about how small actions can have ripple effects. I had not set out to reform the HOA or become some kind of neighborhood hero. I had just been pissed off about an unfair fine and too stubborn to let it go. But in being stubborn, in refusing to back down, I had accidentally sparked something bigger. Other people in the neighborhood had found their voices. They had started attending meetings, asking questions, demanding accountability. The whole culture had shifted. It reminded me of something my dad used to say. "Nathan, most people will push you as far as you let them. The trick is deciding where your line is and not letting anyone cross it." My line had been a snow pile. Ridiculous as that sounds, it had been the thing I refused to compromise on. And in defending that line, I had ended up defending something bigger. The right to exist in your own home without constant surveillance and arbitrary punishment. The right to question authority. The right to say, "No, this is not okay," and mean it. November came, and with it the first real snow of the season. Not much, just a dusting that covered the grass and made everything look clean and new. I went outside that morning with my coffee and looked at my property. The corner where the pile had been was covered in white, like a blank canvas. I smiled, remembering how it had looked at its peak. 22 feet of pure defiance, visible from 3 streets over. Derek called me that afternoon. "Hey man, saw we got some snow. You need any deliveries?" I laughed. "No, I think I am good on snow for the rest of my life." "Fair enough. But if you ever decide to build another pile, you know who to call." "I will keep that in mind." Thanksgiving came, and Frank invited me over for dinner with his family. It was nice, sitting around a table with good people, eating too much food and watching football. His daughter asked me about the snow pile, and I told her the story in appropriate terms for a 10-year-old. "So you built a giant pile of snow just because they told you not to?" she asked. "Sort of. They said I had to move the snow, and I did not think that was fair." "That is cool. I got in trouble at school once for talking back to my teacher when she was being mean to another kid." Her parents exchanged glances, and I tried not to laugh. Well, there is a difference between being respectful and standing up for what is right. You have to figure out which is which. How do you know? You ask yourself if you are fighting for a good reason or just because you are mad. If it is a good reason, then you stand your ground. If it is just because you are mad, you let it go. She thought about that, then nodded. "Okay." After dinner, Frank walked me out to my car. "Thanks for that. She has been talking about your snow pile for months. I think you are like her hero or something." "That is a lot of pressure. I am just a guy who got annoyed with his HOA. You are more than that, Nathan, whether you meant to be or not." I drove home thinking about responsibility. About how your actions affect other people, even when you do not intend them to. The snow pile had been my own personal rebellion, but it had become a symbol for everyone else. I had not asked for that, but it had happened anyway. December brought more snow, heavier this time. Real accumulation that had to be shoveled and plowed. I cleared my driveway, piled the snow neatly on my lawn, and made absolutely sure none of it blocked anything that could be considered community property. Tom saw me shoveling one morning and came over to help. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, then he said, "You know Barbara moved, right?" I heard rumors. "She bought a condo in Florida, no HOA. Apparently she said she was done with community living. Good for her. I hope she is happier there." "You really mean that?" "Yeah, I do." I was never mad at Barbara as a person. I was mad at what she represented. The power trip, the lack of accountability. If she has moved on from that, then good. Everyone deserves to find peace. We finished shoveling, and Tom headed back to his house. I stood there in the cold, looking at my driveway and thinking about how much had changed in less than a year. A house does not make a home. Community makes a home. And community is not about following rules blindly or letting someone with a title push you around. It is about people respecting each other, listening to each other, and working together even when they disagree. We had that now in Meadowbrook Hills. It had taken a fight to get there, a ridiculous battle over snow and signs and fines, but we had gotten there. As the year wound down, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The anger, the frustration, the absurdity of it all. But also the support from neighbors, the validation from the court, and the positive changes that had come from refusing to back down. Was it worth it? The stress, the money, the time, the public attention, yeah. It was worth it, because at the end of the day I had learned something important about myself. I had learned that I could fight when I needed to, that I could stand up to pressure and not fold. That I was more like my father than I had realized. And I had learned that sometimes the most ridiculous battles are the ones most worth fighting. Not because they matter in some grand cosmic sense, but because they matter to you. Because they test who you are and what you stand for. My snow pile had melted months ago, but what it represented would last much longer. It would last in the reformed HOA bylaws, in the neighbors who now spoke up at meetings, in the little girl down the street who learned that standing up for yourself was important. It would last in me. New Year's Eve came, and the neighborhood threw a party at the community center. Everyone was there, drinking and laughing and celebrating. Someone made a joke about building a snow pile at midnight instead of dropping a ball, and everyone laughed. I raised my glass with everyone else when the countdown hit 0. To new beginnings, Tom said. To better communities, someone else added. To standing your ground, Frank said, looking at me. We all drank, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. The party wound down around 2 in the morning. I walked home through the quiet streets, snow crunching under my boots. The Christmas lights were still up on most houses, twinkling in the darkness. Everything was peaceful. When I got home, I made one last cup of coffee for the year and sat on my porch despite the cold. I looked at the corner of my property where the pile had been and smiled. Thanks, Dad, I said quietly to the winter air, for teaching me to be stubborn. The wind picked up, swirling snow around the yard, and for just a moment I could have sworn I heard him laugh. That big, booming laugh he had whenever I did something that made him proud. I finished my coffee and went inside. Tomorrow would be a new year, a fresh start. But I would carry the lessons of the old year with me. The lesson that unjust authority should be challenged, that communities need brave people willing to make waves, that sometimes building the pile higher is exactly the right response. My name is Nathan Voss. I live in Sterling Heights, Michigan. I once built a 22-foot snow pile to spite my HOA, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, because some principles are worth fighting for, no matter how cold it gets.